The proper way to put a cast of flies together is essential if you're going to fish this method. It may seem like a complicated rig, but it's not. In fact, Davy only uses a couple of different knots in the whole setup, but he is particular about leader and dropper lengths to ensure you can turn the whole thing over while casting.
Davey, I was wondering, do you always have 3 flies for your cast?
No, and sometimes actually I use 4, but anyway, 2, often I will use that too, but you also may be fishing in areas that got regulations that permit only the use of 1 fly. And
True.
what of course that doesn't allow you to do is effectively work this fly as a top dropper, because you don't have 1 or more flies below it to give you that anchor point, so to speak. And one other kind of trick to get out of that one is really to make up the system as you wish with a dropper, and about 20 inches or a little bit away from that, just pinch on about a number 1 or something like that shot, and that will actually provide you with the anchor and enable you to still work this fly as you would otherwise.
Oh,
In fact, it could
good
be a real
idea.
deadly technique to do that sometimes.
Good idea.
Yeah.
Davey, do you have a fixed length that you use for your dropper?
The dropper lengths, ideally, to give good movement of the flies in the water, make them swim right, needs to be around about 4 to 6 inches. 5 is a good average, regardless of whatever kind of fly that you're using. There may be one exception to the rule where I may increase that up to, sometimes maybe 10, but that's really just for what we call top dropper working scenarios. And as far as the relative distances between those, well, that's going to vary between around 20 inches and 30. For upstream techniques where I'm using, dead drift patterns, 20 inches is pretty much a good average to use.
Between the droppers?
Correct, between the knots.
Okay.
That's the way to determine that. The dropper lengths, of course, are additional, but yeah, about 20 inches from there to there and there to there. The trick to it is to keep these equal and balance the whole thing out.
Does it cast better that way, or?
Yeah, you get better turnover.
Okay.
And if I'm using, more cross-stream, dead drift and retrieve techniques, probably more like 30 inches is my average distance between those flies.
Well, once you determine the length between your flies, between your dropper knots, and the length of your dropper itself, how do you determine the length from here up to your fly line?
A good way to work that out is this way. On floating line techniques, dead drift, upstream or across or whatever, around about 6 feet. Basically, of course, I want a good separation from the fly line to the fly for obvious reasons. If I'm going more slightly across stream, probably more like about 4 feet. That's because I can keep the fly line well out of the way of the fish's eyes. The flies, ultimately, I want the fish to see. For almost all sunk line techniques with intermediate, whatever the case may be, I usually have around a 4-foot section to the first dropper. And that in itself enables you to work the top dropper fly effectively. If you have the distance from the fly line to the top dropper fly either too short or too long, you cannot effect working that fly properly in coordination with rod movement and left-hand retrieve methods. There's a kind of a point where it works perfect, and either less or greater, it's not effective.
Davey, it might seem obvious, but to me, I wonder how you determine the tippet size or your leader
Diameter?
pound weight or diameter from where to where.
It's determined by essentially one thing, that is the size of the fly that I'm using. For example, these are fairly large flies, size 10. In this case, I can use anything from 4, 5, 6, 7, and possibly 8 pound at times, depending on the conditions and the kind of fish I'm fishing for. If the big fish are going to come out and really hit me hard, well, lessens the chance of breakoffs. On the other hand, if I'm fishing dead drift techniques with 16s or 18s, soft hackles or something like that, I'm going to probably even go down to 6X, even though I'm fishing with 3 flies. What I would do in a case like that would be to run from a surface or a floating dry line, so to speak, possibly a tapered leader. By reduction of that from, say, a 6X, I then add on the sections that I need for my droppers. If, for example, I'm fishing with intermediate line techniques, I just run straight through the same break and strain right the way through.
Right off the fly line?
Yeah, there's no purpose served at all to use a tapered leader, because essentially I'm only using a 4-foot section from the fly line to the first fly.
Right.
And They don't make taper leaders in 4-foot lengths, at least not to my knowledge anyway. So I'll just run through from that, whatever it is, 6 pound right the way through. I may go 8 pound and then down to 4, but what is the determining factor for me is the size of the fly I'm using in the relationship of the diameter of the line, which gives this fly some degree of movement in the water.
So size 10s, you're using 4 pound?
Yeah, about 4 to 6 pound on average.
Okay, and size 16 or 18 flies, that's when
Yeah.
you go to 6X or
Yeah, that's
2 or
right.
3 pound test.
Correct. Yes, absolutely correct.
Well, that's, again, it's simple enough.
Yeah, it's, you know as well as I, you know, once you're used to dealing with fish, the actual breaking training becomes of lesser significance. It's you just know how to set
Yeah.
the hook and deal with the fish, and that's
And
it.
or after the strike.
Yeah.
You will discover that creating a cast of flies, once you've mastered it, can be more intriguing than intimidating. After our next lesson and presentation, we'll have Davy show you the knots he uses to make up his casts.
Davey, how you build this leader system and how you tie your dropper on, the knots are very important, aren't they?
Absolutely right. I mean, that's just about one of the most, or the weakest link in the whole system, to be perfectly honest about it. So yeah, I pay a great deal of attention to it. Really, the simplest way to do that is this. That's your fly line, and this is your section of monofilament from the fly line where you're going to form your first dropper. And I use what is called the surgeon's knot, a couple of other names for it, but essentially that's what it amounts to. And that knot provides two things. First one, it allows you to tie two diameter monofilaments together, and secondly, it provides you with the dropper, i.e. a length of line off it. And I'll just demonstrate that. All we're going to do is this. We're going to set that to a point visually where we want the knot to be and the dropper to come from, okay? Pick up the two pieces of line like that, form a loop. What I then do is to pass this through that loop 3 minimum or 4 turns, either one. I prefer to use 4 myself, it's just kind of like something I've always done. But in any event, once you've done that, you draw them together like this. And as you see, you end up with the two longer section, this one going to the next section or the lower fly, this one to your fly line. Now this is the important thing to always remember. It is the lower of the two that you tie the fly to. And I'll show you for why. If we pull down, we're actually pulling in a kind of a straight line to that knot. If we use the upper, see what happens?
Pulls the knot apart.
Yeah, exactly right. That is significantly weaker than that. Always remember,
Pulling here makes it tighter, pulling here makes it looser.
it'll also pull the line against itself too and
Cut itself
cut
off.
itself. Yeah. So always remember, it is the lower that the fly is tied onto, and the lower is always the piece that runs to the fly line. So if this is 6 pound, for example, that fly is going to be tied onto 6 pound.
So your first tippet is bigger than the rest of the tippets.
Well, we may go through with 6 pound all the way through, but basically what I'm saying, if we had tied on some 4 pound here,
Right.
this is going to be 6 pound, but the next section down
Your longer
is going to
section
be
is
4 pound. Correct.
Your next dropper is going to be 4 pound.
That's correct. But just always remember that tip. It's one golden rule. The lower is the attachment for the fly, not the upper.
So you always want it facing in the direction
That's
down
right. And it
towards your
also,
last fly.
it also helps to swing the fly too. That's another
Yeah.
thing.
So for the next dropper, whether it be 20 or 30 inches down from this knot, we do exactly the same thing again
Correct.
with our choice of diameter or pound test line.
Correct.
And this would give us a 4 pound test tippet leading out to our second fly.
Correct. That's correct. If we'd have if this section here was 4 pound onto that being 6, yeah, and we go again with 4
Okay.
to run it straight through.
And you could possibly use 4 pound test again here, the same diameter?
Yeah, of course you can.
Okay.
Yeah, of course you can. You can, in some occasions, actually reduce it, but I would never recommend you did that. You know, by the definition of gradually decreasing, you're actually increasing weakness.
Right.
It's better to keep the whole system essentially the same by way of diameter and or breaking strain related. It's the same. The one thing to remember actually is this, is the relative distance, say this being from here to here. Measure it and hold it, because wherever you hold it and you put the second section to it is where the knot's going to be. You're not going to be able to change that, because once you start it, you can't move. So remember that factor. You know, if you start too short, it's going to be too short. If you go too long, it's going to be too long. So make sure you get that measured. Okay, that's why I want the second dropper.
Good tip.
Davy Watten's knots for assembling his cast of flies are simple and fast once you've learned them. It is, however, important to do them right and the same way over and over again.
Davy, I noticed too that it's very important how you attach the flies to your system here, your entire cast of flies.
Yeah, I pay great attention to that, because first and foremost, it's the fly that you want the fish to take. And secondly, I want that fly to exhibit itself and move to the fish's eye the right way. And I'm very, very kind of fussy, if you wouldn't mind just to hold that up there for me, Gary. If you notice when you hold this cast of flies up, you notice that the hooks are facing away from the main line.
Yes.
Now, if you tie it the right way, they will stay that way. And of course, when the flies are being fished through that column of water, they sit up correctly like this. And also, when you're working your dropper flies out, which could be either this one or this one, when they track through the water, the hook runs that way and provides far better hooking potential too, as opposed to the hook out, or the fly, shall we say, fishing, well, I would define it as upside down.
Far less tangles this way too.
Absolutely right, yeah, because it keeps it away. And there's a kind of a little special way I do that. If you do it, you know, you practice it, you get it right every time. But anyway, let me demonstrate to you the knot I use. I used this knot all my life, you know. When I was a kid, I didn't have no books or nothing to teach me about tying knots, and my objective, obviously, at that time was just to get the hook attached to monofilament, you know, without coming off. Is that when I attach it, I always put the monofilament from below the hook eye, not above, below it. Once I've done that, I rotate the hook outwards and hold that in my hand, so the hook and barb are facing away from me. Okay?
Okay.
Assuming that we're in that position, this being the hook, point and barb facing away from me, without changing that relative grip here, I form the knot, which is essentially just a over and under and an over and under configuration. Thereafter, that's drawn taut.
What do we call this knot?
They call that a Davy Knot fly knot. It has had some notoriety in a lot of published magazines and this, that and the other, but you see what I'm explaining, that it keeps everything that way.
It certainly does. Neat.
And that's important. that's important to me. It really is, that fly, when it tracks through,
And
comes through.
during the cast or during the swing, it
Comes through like that.
That's pretty good, sir.
Yeah.
Trial and error.